Most of us grow up learning to fit in. We get used to hiding the things that make us different, hoping that playing it safe will help us succeed. But what if the opposite is true? What if the things you think are odd or unusual about you, the interests, habits, or ideas that don't seem to fit, are actually your biggest strengths? That's the idea behind this book. I wrote it for anyone who has ever felt a bit out of place or wondered if they could turn their weirdness into something valuable. You don't need to pretend to be someone else to find your purpose. Instead, you can use your natural quirks and interests to build a life and career that actually fit you. In these chapters, I'll show you how to spot what makes you different and use it as a tool, not a weakness. You'll learn simple steps to find your strengths, see the value in your unique traits, and build skills around what comes most naturally. You'll also learn how to create your own path, test your ideas quickly, and find meaning in your work, even if you haven't found your passion yet. This book isn't about being strange just for the sake of it. It's about being real and seeing that what makes you different can also make you powerful. If you've ever felt like you don't quite fit the mold or wished you could use your real self in your work and life, this book is for you. Let's get started. Let's see what happens when you let your true self shine. Chapter 1. Start weird. You're sitting in another meeting that could have been an email, nodding along to strategies that sound like they were written by a committee of robots. Everyone around the table speaks in the same corporate dialect, chasing the same metrics, celebrating the same bland victories. Meanwhile, that voice in your head, the one with the unconventional ideas, the sideways solutions, the perspective that makes people tilt their heads, stays locked away like a dirty secret. Here's the brutal truth. You've been trained to sand down your edges to fit into rooms you don't even want to be in. Then you wonder why work feels like wearing shoes 2 sizes too small. This isn't about finding your passion or following your dreams. This is about weaponizing what makes you different. Because in a world drowning in sameness, weird isn't just an advantage. It's the only sustainable competitive edge you've got. The conformity trap. Most people are sleepwalking through borrowed ambitions. They chase promotions they don't want, optimize for metrics that don't matter to them, and wonder why success feels hollow. The problem isn't that they're lazy or incompetent. The problem is they're competing in games designed for generic players. When you hide your quirks, obsessions, and unconventional approaches, you enter a race to the bottom. You compete on price, time, and approval, never on the thing that actually matters, your irreplaceable perspective. You become a commodity in a world that pays premiums for scarcity. The cost is staggering. Chronic boredom becomes your baseline. Flow states disappear. You spend your days producing output without identity, motion without meaning. Your reputation can't compound because there's nothing distinctive to remember. People forget you after first meetings because you've given them nothing memorable to hold on to. You know you're stuck when you can't explain your value in one crisp sentence. When you chase trends instead of setting them. When your work could be done by anyone with your job title and a decent internet connection. The regret curve. Here's what happens if you keep playing it safe. Regret compounds faster than interest. Every year you spend hiding your edge is a year of unexpressed potential that you'll never get back. Your default future calcifies around you like concrete. Options disappear. The window for bold moves narrows. You become reliable, but replaceable. Your self-trust erodes because you've trained yourself to ignore your instincts. Relationships misalign because you've been performing a character instead of being yourself. Your courage budget shrinks because you've stopped taking the small risks that build confidence. The tragedy isn't that you'll fail. The tragedy is that you'll succeed at becoming someone you never wanted to be. Your Weird Works transformation. This book will teach you to flip the script. Instead of hiding your differences, you'll weaponize them. Instead of competing on sameness, you'll dominate through distinction. Instead of chasing borrowed goals, you'll build a personal monopoly that attracts the right opportunities to you. By the time you finish this journey, you'll have 3 game-changing assets. First, a 3-word edge mantra that captures your distinctive value. Second, a 1-sentence direction statement that guides every major decision. Third, a 30-day prototype plan that turns ideas into evidence. You'll identify your top 2 spikes, the areas where you're unmistakably strong, and your 2 valleys, the weaknesses you'll manage rather than fix. You'll choose a test niche where your weird meets real demand. You'll ship your first prototype and collect feedback that either validates your direction or saves you from a costly mistake. The compounding effect. This isn't a one-time fix. It's a flywheel that gets stronger with each turn. Clear reputation attracts inbound opportunities. Work that matches your wiring increases flow and energy. Pricing power expands as you become known for something specific. The prototype feedback refinement cycle creates a stronger signal. Confidence builds courage, which enables bigger bets. Better arenas attract better collaborators, which produce better results. Your weird becomes your wealth. The 7-step path. The journey follows a precise sequence. First, you'll map your Spiky profile, charting your sharp highs and honest lows. Then, you'll learn to fit the quirk, translating your oddities into valuable skills. Next comes shadow power, where you'll reframe your supposed flaws as context-specific strengths. The 4th step is Edgecraft, dialing your offering just odd enough to be memorable without losing clarity. 5th, you'll build your personal monopoly, combining rare skills and clear positioning into an ownable niche. 6th, you'll build prototypes that test your theories with real users and real stakes. Finally, you'll establish a review and iterate cadence that keeps you sharp and responsive to feedback. Why this order matters. The sequence is strategic, not arbitrary. You must see your difference before you can scale it. Build capability before brand. Signal your edge before you sell it. Own a lane before you optimize it. Test early to avoid grand wrong moves. Most people skip straight to marketing before they've clarified what makes them worth marketing. They build personal brands around generic competence. They launch big before they've learned small. This approach inverts that logic, ensuring every step builds on solid ground. Winners versus losers. Winners collect data through small bets and iterate loudly. They seek honest feedback and ask for stakes. They measure meaning per hour, not hours worked. They ship imperfect work because perfect work never ships. Losers wait for permission and polish endlessly. They chase trends and fear polarization. They explain instead of execute. They confuse motion with progress and busyness with value. The difference isn't talent or luck, it's posture. Winners treat their career like a series of experiments. Losers treat it like a performance where they can't afford to make mistakes. The courage to be unmistakable. Your weird isn't a bug to be fixed. It's a feature to be amplified. The market doesn't need another generic consultant, designer, or analyst. It needs the one who approaches problems from an angle no one else can see. The world is drowning in sameness. Every industry, every role, every market is saturated with people who've been trained to think and act alike. That's not your competition. That's your opportunity. Your strangest instincts, your most unconventional approaches, your deepest obsessions, these aren't distractions from your purpose. They are your purpose, waiting to be translated into value. But here's the thing about weird. It only works when it works. Quirks without skills are just noise. Edges without outcomes are just eccentricity. That's why the next chapter, Weirdness Edge, will teach you to inventory your oddities and convert them into usable advantages that people will pay for. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Weirdness Edge. There's a consultant who gets hired specifically because she asks uncomfortable questions in the first 5 minutes of every meeting. A designer who's known for creating mock-ups that look like they were sketched by a caffeinated teenager. A project manager who sends voice memos instead of emails and somehow gets faster responses than anyone else on the team. What do they have in common? They've stopped apologizing for the things that make them different. Instead, they've turned their quirks into calling cards. Most people spend their careers trying to smooth out their rough edges. They study how successful people behave, then attempt to copy those behaviors like a paint-by-numbers kit. The result? A marketplace flooded with beige professionals who sound alike, think alike, and deliver predictably similar results. But here's what the copycats miss. The most memorable people aren't memorable because they're perfect. They're memorable because they're distinct. And distinction, it turns out, is the ultimate competitive advantage. The memory advantage. Your brain is wired to remember what stands out. Psychologists call this the distinctiveness heuristic, the tendency to recall unusual information more easily than common information. In a world where everyone's LinkedIn profile reads like it was written by the same AI, being memorable isn't just nice to have, it's essential for survival. When you compete on uniqueness instead of endurance, something magical happens. Sales cycles shrink because people remember you from the first conversation. Word of mouth spreads because you've given people something specific to talk about. Decision-making becomes clearer because your edge acts as a filter. Some opportunities are obviously right for you, others obviously wrong. This isn't about being weird for the sake of being weird. It's about recognizing that your natural oddities, when properly channeled, create what economists call monopolistic competition. You're not just another consultant, designer, or analyst. You're the one who does it your way. The compound effect is where things get interesting. Every time you express your edge publicly, you build what researchers call identity capital. Your reputation becomes more specific, more ownable, more defensible. Specific reputations create optionality. Optionality creates pricing power. Pricing power creates choice about who you work with and how you work. The inventory process. So, what exactly is a weirdness edge? It's any trait, habit, or approach that makes you distinctly you. Your obsessions, the topics you can talk about for hours without getting bored. Your micro-tastes, the tiny preferences that seem insignificant but actually reveal your aesthetic. Your pace, whether you're a sprinter who delivers in bursts or a marathon runner who maintains steady output. Your humor style, your communication quirks, your contradictions. The key is learning to see these traits as assets rather than liabilities. That tendency to dive deep into rabbit holes, that's research capability. The way you explain complex things using simple analogies, that's translation skill. Your habit of asking, but what if we did the opposite? That's strategic thinking. Here's how to build your weirdness inventory. Set a timer for 20 minutes and write fast. No editing, no second guessing. List 10 things you're genuinely fascinated by, not things you think you should be interested in, but things that actually capture your attention. Then, list 10 unusual behaviors or habits that people have noticed about you. Finally, list 10 activities you do purely for fun with no external reward. Look for overlaps. Circle the patterns. The things that show up across multiple categories are your strongest signals. These aren't random quirks. They're consistent expressions of your core wiring. Now compress everything into a 3-word mantra. Not a job title, not a skill description, but a memorable phrase that captures your distinctive approach. Chaos into clarity. Questions before answers. Simple but surprising. The goal is something you can say in one breath that makes people lean in and ask, "What do you mean by that?" The validation test. Before you get too attached to your self-assessment, run it through external validation. Ask 5 people who know your work this question. What do you thank me for? Not what you're good at, not what your job description says, but what they're actually grateful for when they work with you. Extract the verbs from their responses. Cluster the themes. Compare what they say to what you wrote in your inventory. The overlap is your sweet spot, the place where your natural weirdness creates genuine value for others. This validation step is crucial because it prevents you from falling in love with edges that don't actually edge. Your quirks need to solve problems, not just express personality. The market doesn't care about your self-expression unless it translates into outcomes they value. The myths that hold you back. 3 myths keep most people from leveraging their weirdness edge. The first is that normal is safer, but safety is an illusion when you're indistinguishable from everyone else. Commodities always race to the bottom. When you have no distinctive value, you compete purely on price and availability. That's not safety, that's a slow-motion career death. The second myth is that weird is childish. This one's particularly toxic because it makes you ashamed of the very traits that could set you apart. But childlike curiosity powers innovation. Adults often forget that play reveals edge. Professional doesn't mean personality-free. It means reliable outcomes delivered in your authentic style. The third myth is that only big talents count. This makes people ignore their micro edges while waiting for some massive breakthrough. But micro edges combine into macro advantages. Taste and point of view compound over time. The combination of reliability plus oddity creates trust with sparkle, the holy grail of professional positioning. Making it stick. Once you've identified your edge, you need to make it visible and repeatable. Add it to your bio and use it in introductions. Let it guide your yes and no decisions. Start one weekly ritual that expresses your edge publicly. A Monday morning observation, a Friday afternoon reflection, a monthly deep dive into something you're obsessed with. Label your edges like products. Memorable names increase recall. Keep them to 3 words maximum. Use them in meetings and emails. When someone asks what makes your approach different, you should have a crisp answer ready. Collect social proof along the way. Share small wins without falling into humble brag territory. Ask for 1-sentence testimonials that specifically mention your edge. Screenshot unsolicited praise that references your distinctive approach. This isn't vanity, it's evidence that your weirdness is working. The danger zones. 3 things can derail your weirdness edge. The first is keeping it vague and vibes only. I'm creative or I think differently tells people nothing. Demand specific examples. Add verbs and nouns. I turn complex regulations into simple checklists is an edge. I'm detail-oriented is not. The second danger is self-doubt or backlash. When you start expressing your edge more boldly, some people won't get it. That's the point. Start in low-stakes arenas and collect micro-wins to build confidence. The goal isn't universal approval. It's magnetic attraction from the right people. The third trap is edge without utility. Being different for the sake of being different is just performance art. Every edge needs to solve a problem someone cares about. If you can't connect your quirk to a valuable outcome, it's not an edge, it's just eccentricity. The compound effect. When you nail your weirdness edge, the results compound quickly. Good outcomes include a clear edge list and a 3-word mantra you actually use in conversations. Excellent outcomes mean your edge is visible on public profiles and you've established a weekly ritual for expressing it. The best outcome is when inbound requests start referencing your edge and people use your mantra when they refer you to others. Your weirdness edge is the foundation for everything that follows. But having an edge is just the beginning. The next step is learning to map your natural peaks and valleys with surgical precision, because once you know where you spike highest, you can design a life that lives in those zones. That's where your spiky profile comes in, and it's more revealing than any personality test you've ever taken. Chapter 3, Spiky Profile. Picture a radar chart with 8 points radiating from the center. Most people's charts look like deflated balloons, mediocre scores scattered around a flat, forgettable middle. But the most successful people? Their charts look like lightning bolts, sharp peaks that pierce the outer ring, deep valleys that drop towards zero. No apologies, no averaging, no attempt to be good at everything. This is your spiky profile, and it's about to become your secret weapon. The conventional wisdom says you should work on your weaknesses, round out your rough edges, become a well-balanced professional who can handle anything thrown your way. This advice sounds reasonable until you realize it's designed to create interchangeable parts in a corporate machine, not distinctive humans who command premium prices. Here's what the balance seekers miss. Contrast creates memory. Extremes build identity. And in a marketplace that rewards the irreplaceable, your sharpest spikes matter infinitely more than your deepest valleys. Why contrast wins? Your brain is wired to notice and remember extremes. When someone describes you to a colleague, they don't mention your adequate project management skills or your decent communication abilities. They remember the thing you do better than anyone else they know. That one area where you're not just good, you're unmistakably excellent. This isn't just psychology, it's economics. Spikes justify premium positioning because they create scarcity. Anyone can be competent across multiple dimensions. Very few people can be exceptional in specific areas. When you concentrate your energy where you naturally peak, you don't just get better results, you get results that only you can deliver. The operational benefits compound quickly. When you design your work around your spikes, time shifts toward high-return activities. Energy flows instead of drains. Collaboration becomes strategic. You find partners whose spikes complement your valleys, creating teams that are stronger than the sum of their parts. Most importantly, burnout drops dramatically when misfit work shrinks. You stop spending 40 hours a week pretending to be someone you're not. Instead, you spend most of your time doing what you do best, which feels less like work and more like play with a paycheck. The radar revelation. Building your spiky profile starts with brutal honesty about your actual capabilities, not your aspirational ones. Choose 8 to 10 traits that matter in your field, things like analytical thinking, storytelling, speed of execution, attention to detail, relationship building, strategic vision, creative problem solving, or technical depth. Now comes the hard part, scoring yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 for each trait. Not where you want to be, not where you think you should be, but where you actually are right now. A 5 means you're competent but unremarkable. A 7 means you're notably good. A 9 means you're in the top 10% of people you know. A 10 means you're the best at this thing in any room you enter. Most people inflate their scores because honesty feels dangerous. They give themselves 6s and 7s across the board, creating the flat, forgettable profile that guarantees mediocrity. But here's the counterintuitive truth. Your valleys are as valuable as your peaks because they force you to make choices. Once you've scored yourself, get 5 people who know your work to score you on the same traits. Average their responses and compare them to your self-assessment. The discrepancies reveal your blind spots, areas where you're either underestimating or overestimating your abilities. Circle your top 2 spikes and your bottom 2 valleys. These 4 points define your professional DNA. Your spikes are where you create disproportionate value. Your valleys are where you need guardrails, templates, or partners to prevent disaster. The scheduling revolution. Knowing your spikes is worthless unless you design your week around them. The goal is simple but radical. Spend at least 60% of your working hours in your spike zones. This isn't about perfection. It's about intentional imbalance that creates exponential returns. Block 10 hours per week for activities that leverage your top 2 spikes. Protect these blocks like you'd protect a client meeting. When someone asks you to do something that falls in your valley zones, your default answer becomes, "Let me find someone better suited for that," or "Here's a template that handles this efficiently." This requires saying no to opportunities that don't fit your profile, even when they seem attractive. It means delegating or automating valley tasks instead of trying to improve at them. It means being honest with colleagues about what you're great at and what you're not. Track your weekly meaning per hour, a simple metric that measures how much of your time was spent doing work that energizes you versus work that drains you. Review this every Friday and adjust the following week accordingly. The goal isn't perfection, it's progress toward a work life that matches your wiring. The balance trap. 3 myths keep people trapped in mediocrity instead of embracing their spikes. The first is the belief that you should fix your weaknesses before leveraging your strengths. This leads to endless repair projects that delay excellence. Weakness management isn't value creation, it's risk mitigation. Shore up your valleys enough to prevent disasters, but don't live in them. The second myth is that balance equals success, but balanced inputs yield average outputs. Breakthrough results come from spike concentration, not well-rounded competence. Balance is what you do for recovery, not what you build your identity around. The third myth is that versatility beats depth. This one's particularly seductive in a rapidly changing economy where adaptability seems crucial. But versatility without an anchor confuses your market. People need to know what to call you for. Depth creates irreplaceability. Anchor first, then add range. Making spikes visible. Your spiky profile only creates value when other people can see it. Add your spikes to your bio and lead with them in introductions. Instead of saying, "I'm a marketing manager," try, "I turn complex data into simple stories," or "I build systems that scale without breaking." Create signature assets that showcase each spike. If analysis is your strength, publish a weekly breakdown of industry trends. If storytelling is your edge, record short videos that explain complex concepts. If speed is your superpower, document how you deliver results in half the typical time frame. Use metaphors to make your spikes memorable. "I'm like a translator between technical teams and business stakeholders," or "I'm the person who finds the signal in the noise," or "I turn chaos into systems." These phrases stick in people's minds and make you easier to refer. Ask for spike-aligned referrals. When someone thanks you for your work, follow up with, "I love doing this kind of project. Do you know anyone else who needs help with similar challenges?" This creates a flywheel where your best work generates more of your best work. The calibration system. 2 tools will keep your spiky profile sharp over time. First, give each spike a memorable name and create rituals around expressing it. Monday morning analysis, story surgery sessions, speed sprints, whatever fits your style and schedule. Named practices become habits, and habits compound into reputation. Second, find a calibrator buddy who will keep you honest, someone who can spot when you're drifting toward the middle, taking on too much valley work, or inflating your scores. Schedule quarterly check-ins to rescore your profile and discuss whether your time allocation matches your stated priorities. Celebrate visible spike wins publicly. When you deliver exceptional results in your spike zones, share the story. Not to brag, but to reinforce your positioning and attract similar opportunities. The market needs to see your spikes in action to believe they're real. The danger zones. 3 things can derail your spiky profile. Inflated self-ratings create false confidence and misaligned positioning. Combat this with peer scoring and objective metrics. If you think you're a 9 at strategic thinking but can't point to strategies you've created that changed outcomes, you're probably a 6. Ignoring valleys entirely leads to spectacular failures that damage your reputation. Design guardrails, templates, checklists, partners that prevent valley disasters without requiring you to become competent in areas where you'll never excel. Overspecialization too early can trap you in a niche that becomes obsolete. Keep one exploratory slot weekly for adjacent skills that might become future spikes. Evolution beats revolution, but stagnation kills both. The compound effect. When you nail your spiky profile, the results are unmistakable. Good outcomes include clearly identified spikes that you schedule weekly and valleys that you've templated or delegated. Excellent outcomes mean 60% or more of your work hours happen in spike zones, with public proof of spike-driven results. The best outcome is when the market knows you for your spikes and opportunity flow matches your strengths. People call you for specific challenges because they know you're the person who excels at solving them. Your calendar fills with work that energizes instead of drains you. But having sharp spikes is only half the equation. The other half is learning to translate your natural quirks into skills that people will pay for. And that's where the real alchemy happens. Because when your weirdness meets competence, something magical emerges that no competitor can copy. Chapter 4. Fit the quirk. You know that person who can't stop asking why in meetings? The one who drives everyone slightly crazy with their relentless curiosity? They just got promoted to head of strategy because someone finally realized that their annoying habit of questioning everything is exactly what the company needed to avoid costly mistakes. Or consider the colleague who talks impossibly fast and gestures wildly when explaining ideas. Last month, they started facilitating live brainstorming sessions and suddenly became the most requested meeting leader in the organization. Their hyperactive communication style, once seen as unprofessional, is now their signature strength. This is what happens when you learn to fit the quirk, when you stop trying to suppress your natural oddities and start translating them into valuable capabilities. It's the bridge between being weird and being useful, between having an edge and having a career. Most people spend years trying to sand down their rough edges, not realizing that those edges might be exactly what the market needs. They assume their quirks are obstacles to overcome rather than assets to develop. But here's the secret. Your strangest traits often contain your strongest potential skills. The translation problem. Having a quirk without a skill is just noise. You might be the person who notices patterns others miss, but if you can't translate those observations into actionable insights, you're just the person who points out random connections. You might have an obsessive attention to detail, but if you can't channel that obsession into quality control or risk assessment, you're just the person who slows down meetings with nitpicking. On the flip side, having skills without quirks makes you a commodity. Anyone can learn project management or data analysis or graphic design, but very few people can do those things with your particular flavor, your distinctive approach, your natural way of seeing problems. The magic happens in the fit, when your quirks become the delivery mechanism for your skills, when your tendency to question everything becomes strategic thinking, when your obsessive research habits become competitive intelligence, when your ability to explain complex things simply becomes training and communication expertise. This fit creates something economists call monopolistic competition. You're not just another analyst or consultant or designer. You're the one who does it your way, and your way produces results that only you can deliver. The credibility bridge. Demonstrated capability beats promises every time. When you can show someone a concrete example of your quirk skill combination producing real outcomes, you don't need to convince them of your value. They can see it. This is why the most successful people aren't necessarily the most talented. They're the ones who've learned to make their talents visible and useful. Competence compounds into passion in ways that surprise most people. The better you get at channeling your quirks into valuable skills, the more energized you become by your work. This isn't just feel-good psychology, it's practical economics. When you're energized by what you do it better, which creates better outcomes, which creates more opportunities to do it again. Clear fit accelerates referrals because it gives people specific language to describe what you do. Instead of saying, she's really smart, or he's creative, they can say, she turns chaos into systems, or he finds the story in the data. Specific descriptions create specific opportunities. The mapping process. Building your quirk to skill map starts with honest inventory. List 5 of your most persistent quirks, the traits that show up consistently across different contexts and time periods. These might be behavioral patterns, thinking styles, communication habits, or ways you approach problems. For each quirk, identify one formal skill it could translate into. Your tendency to dive deep into rabbit holes could become research capability. Your habit of asking uncomfortable questions could become strategic thinking. Your need to organize everything could become systems design. Your ability to see multiple perspectives could become facilitation or mediation. The key is choosing skills that have clear market demand. For each skill, name one specific problem that people pay to solve. Research capability solves the problem of making decisions without enough information. Strategic thinking solves the problem of knowing what to do when the path isn't obvious. Systems design solves the problem of scaling without breaking. Choose the combination that gives you the highest energy and addresses the highest need. This becomes your focus for the next 30 days. the 30-day sprint. Here's where most people get stuck. They identify the fit, but never develop the competence to back it up. Having a quirk that could become a skill isn't the same as having a skill. You need to build the bridge deliberately and systematically. Design a 30-day micro-curriculum around your chosen quirk skill combination. Week 1 focuses on fundamentals plus creating your first artifact. If you're developing research capability, spend the week learning research methodologies and produce a one-page analysis of a topic relevant to your field. Week 2 adds constraints and public sharing. Practice your skill under time pressure or with limited resources. Share your work publicly and invite feedback. This forces you to move beyond theoretical understanding to practical application. Week 3 involves a real user and performance measurement. Find someone with an actual problem that your skill could solve. Deliver a solution and measure the outcome. This is where you discover whether your quirk skill fit actually creates value for others. Week 4 produces a deliverable and collects a testimonial. Create something substantial that demonstrates your capability, a detailed analysis, a strategic recommendation, a system design, a facilitated outcome. Ask the person you helped to describe the value you created in their own words. The professional myths. 3 myths keep people from leveraging their quirk skill combinations. The first is that skills must match your degree or job title. This creates artificial boundaries that limit your options. Degrees prove commitment, not destiny. Skills can be ported across domains when you can show relevant examples. Buyers care about outcomes, not pedigrees. The second myth is that you need years of experience before you're credible. This leads to endless preparation without execution. But credibility equals clarity plus proof, not calendar time. One strong artifact that demonstrates your capability can open more doors than years of generic experience. Fast feedback beats slow perfection because it accelerates your learning curve. The third myth is that your quirks are inherently unprofessional. This makes people ashamed of the very traits that could differentiate them. But professional simply means reliable outcomes. You can deliver those outcomes in your natural style as long as you fit that style to the appropriate setting. Context creates acceptability. The same intensity that's annoying in a casual conversation might be exactly what's needed in a crisis situation. The learning accelerators. 2 strategies will speed up your skill development. First, learn in public. Share your notes, invite critique, and ask practitioners precise questions. This creates accountability and attracts feedback that improves your performance. Document your failures as data rather than shame. Each mistake teaches you something about how to apply your quirk more effectively. Second, borrow a mentor by osmosis. Find someone who's already successful at the skill you're developing and study their public work. Reverse engineer their approach and replicate one small piece to their standards. Create a checklist of what good performance looks like and measure yourself against it regularly. This isn't about copying their style. It's about understanding the underlying principles so you can apply them in your own distinctive way. The proof asset. Your 30-day sprint should produce one concrete proof asset, a one-page before and after case that shows your quirk skill combination in action. Include visuals or metrics that make the outcome tangible. Write a concise summary that someone could understand in 60 seconds. Add a call to action for a small pilot project. This proof asset becomes your credibility foundation. It's what you show when someone asks what makes you different. It's what you reference when you're explaining your value proposition. It's what you point to when you're asking for referrals or new opportunities. The danger zones. 3 things can derail your quirk skill development. Overfitting to a tiny niche creates expertise that's too narrow to be commercially viable. Combat this by interviewing 5 potential buyers to understand adjacent problems your skill could solve. Skill plateaus happen when you stop challenging yourself. Raise the difficulty level regularly. Add stretch deliverables that push your capabilities, and find a calibrator who can spot when you're coasting. Messaging confusion occurs when you can't explain your quirk skill combination clearly. If you can't describe what you do in a single breath, you need to simplify. Remove jargon, add concrete examples, and test your explanation with people outside your field. The compound effect. When you nail your quirk skill fit, the results are unmistakable. Good outcomes include one solid deliverable that proves your combination works, and one testimonial that references your unique approach. Excellent outcomes mean you've developed a repeatable offer framed around your combination and found your first paying pilot client or internal sponsor. The best outcome is a consistent pipeline of people requesting your specific combination and an early reputation as the person who does X this way. You become known not just for what you do, but for how you do it. But even the most perfectly fitted quirk skill combination can backfire if you don't understand when and how to deploy it, because the traits that make you brilliant in one context can make you insufferable in another, and learning to navigate that paradox is where your real power lies. Chapter 5, Shadow Power. There's something lurking in your professional closet that you've been trying to hide for years. Maybe it's your tendency to be brutally direct when everyone else is dancing around the truth. Perhaps it's your obsessive need to understand every detail before making a decision. Or it could be your natural introversion in a world that seems to reward the loudest voice in the room. You've been told these traits are problems to fix, weaknesses to overcome, rough edges to sand down. Performance reviews have mentioned them. Colleagues have given you feedback about them. You've probably even hired a coach to help you manage them. But what if everything you've been told about these shadows is wrong? What if the very traits you've been trying to suppress are actually your most powerful competitive advantages, waiting to be deployed in the right context? This is the paradox of shadow power. The characteristics that make you difficult in one situation can make you indispensable in another. The key isn't elimination, it's strategic deployment. The hidden moats. Your shadows contain hidden moats that competitors can't easily cross. That bluntness that makes small talk awkward, it cuts through corporate BS and saves projects from polite failure. That obsessiveness that annoys your teammates, it catches the critical errors that everyone else misses. That shyness that makes networking painful, it creates the deep focus needed for breakthrough insights. The traits you downplay are often the exact reasons people should hire you. When a company needs someone to deliver hard truths to senior leadership, they don't want the diplomat. They want the person who's comfortable being uncomfortable. When a project requires forensic attention to detail, they don't need the big picture visionary. They need the person who can't let go until everything is perfect. Reframing your shadows reduces imposter syndrome by naming the real value you provide. Instead of feeling like you're succeeding despite your flaws, you start recognizing that you're succeeding because of your distinctive operating style. This shift from shame to strategy is psychologically liberating and professionally powerful. Using your shadows deliberately prevents the self-sabotage that comes from overcorrection. When you try to suppress your natural tendencies, you often swing too far in the opposite direction, losing the very qualities that made you effective in the first place. The specificity advantage. Markets reward specificity, and shadows make you incredibly specific. When you own your operating style instead of apologizing for it, you become the obvious choice for certain types of challenges. Trust rises when you describe your approach candidly because people know exactly what they're getting. Clear expectations reduce friction with teams and clients. When you're upfront about how you work, I ask a lot of questions before I commit to a direction, or I prefer to think through problems alone before discussing them, people can adjust their expectations and working styles accordingly. This prevents the misunderstandings that derail projects and relationships. The alternative is exhausting, constantly managing your image, suppressing your instincts, and wondering why work feels like wearing a costume that doesn't fit. When you embrace your shadows strategically, work becomes an expression of who you are rather than a performance of who you think you should be. The inventory process. Building your shadow inventory requires brutal honesty about the feedback you've received over the years. List 3 traits you've been consistently criticized for and capture the exact quotes if you can remember them. Too intense, overly analytical, not a team player, asks too many questions, takes too long to decide. For each shadow trait, list specific contexts where it actually helped outcomes. Your intensity might have saved a project deadline. Your overanalysis might have prevented a costly mistake. Your preference for working alone might have produced insights that group brainstorming couldn't generate. The goal is to translate each shadow into an asset label that you can use in professional introductions. Instead of "I tend to be pretty direct," try "I specialize in delivering difficult feedback that teams need to hear." Instead of "I'm kind of a perfectionist," try "I catch the details that prevent expensive mistakes." This isn't spin, it's recontextualization. You're not changing what you do, you're changing how you frame what you do. The context game. Every trait exists on a spectrum of appropriateness, depending on context. Intensity that's overwhelming in a casual brainstorm might be exactly what's needed in a crisis. Analytical thinking that slows down routine decisions might be crucial for high-stakes choices. Introversion that seems antisocial at networking events might be perfect for deep research projects. The key is learning to match your shadows to contexts where they become features instead of bugs. This requires developing what psychologists call situational awareness, the ability to read environments and adjust your approach accordingly. Create dosage rules for each shadow. Define green zones where you can operate at full intensity, yellow zones where you need to dial it back, and red zones where you should either avoid the situation or find a different way to contribute. Your bluntness might be welcome in strategy sessions, but inappropriate in client entertainment. Your perfectionism might be essential for quality control, but counterproductive for rapid prototyping. Appoint a calibrator buddy who can signal when you're drifting into red zone territory. This person should be someone who understands your value, but can also spot when your shadows are becoming liabilities. Schedule regular postmortems to refine your dosage rules based on real outcomes. The reframe exercise. Here's how to systematically reframe your shadows. For each trait, complete this sentence. I'm often called X, but in Y context, X becomes Z value. For example, I'm often called too direct, but in strategic planning sessions, directness becomes clarity that prevents wasted effort. Draft a 1-paragraph operating manual that you'll share before starting new projects. This should explain your working style, your strengths, and the conditions where you do your best work. Think of it as a user guide for collaborating with you effectively. Pick one project where your shadow trait is actually a hiring reason, where the thing that usually gets you in trouble is exactly what the situation requires. This becomes your proof of concept that shadows can be strategic advantages. The professional myths. 3 myths keep people trapped in shadow shame instead of shadow power. The first is the belief that you need to fix yourself before you can perform at a high level. This leads to endless self-improvement projects that delay actual achievement. But performance improves fastest in contexts that suit your natural wiring. Improvement doesn't mean sanding off every edge. It means learning when and how to deploy your edges strategically. The second myth is that softening your edges makes you more likable. But blandness kills trust more effectively than polarization. People prefer working with someone whose style they understand, even if it's not their preferred style, over someone who seems to have no distinctive approach at all. Likability follows reliability of outcomes, not personality compatibility. The third myth is that professionalism requires polite neutrality. This confuses style with substance. Professional means predictable results, not personality suppression. Your style can be bold, direct, intense, or unconventional as long as your outcomes are solid. Neutrality is often just fear dressed up in formal clothes. The deployment strategy. 2 tactical approaches will help you deploy your shadows effectively. First, develop if-then scripts for managing your intensity. If your directness starts creating tension, Then switch to written communication where tone is easier to control. If your detail orientation starts slowing down progress, then move to a checklist format with clear deadlines. If your introversion starts limiting your influence, then prepare templated approaches for necessary interactions. Second, pre-brief stakeholders about your operating style. Share your operating manual at project kickoff. Invite constraints and establish safe words that team members can use when your shadows need adjustment. Align on success metrics that play to your shadow strengths rather than fighting against them. This isn't about asking for special treatment. It's about creating conditions where your natural approach produces the best results for everyone involved. The communication challenge. Making your shadows visible requires careful messaging. Add your asset labels to your bio and use them in kickoff presentations. Share story proofs that demonstrate how your reframed traits have created value in past projects. My tendency to ask uncomfortable questions helped us identify a fatal flaw in our go-to-market strategy before launch. Ask for testimonials that specifically mention your distinctive operating style. These become powerful social proof that your shadows are actually strengths in the right context. When potential clients see that others have benefited from your directness, intensity, or perfectionism, they're more likely to see these traits as features rather than bugs. The danger zones. 3 pitfalls can undermine your shadow power strategy. Overusing your shadows turns strengths into weaknesses. Even your most valuable traits become liabilities when deployed without restraint. Enforce your dosage rules and schedule regular cool-down periods. Backlash or misinterpretation can occur when people don't understand your intent. Combat this by pre-briefing your approach and anchoring everything to shared success metrics. When people understand that your intensity serves the project's goals, they're more likely to appreciate it. Under-contextualizing your shadows means deploying them in situations where they can't succeed. Be ruthlessly honest about which environments suit your operating style and which don't. It's better to decline opportunities that require you to suppress your natural approach than to accept them and underperform. The compound effect. When you master shadow power, the results are transformative. Good outcomes include clear reframes for each shadow and at least one project designed around your distinctive advantages. Excellent outcomes mean testimonials that praise your unique operating style and a repeatable operating manual that you use in every new engagement. The best outcome is market recognition for your shadows turned strengths and increased deal flow from people who specifically want your distinctive approach. You become known not just for what you deliver, but for how you deliver it. But shadow power is just one piece of the puzzle. Once you've learned to weaponize your supposed weaknesses, the next challenge is learning to stand out in a crowded marketplace where everyone claims to be different. That's where the subtle art of Edgecraft comes in, and it's more nuanced than most people realize. Chapter 6, Edgecraft. Walk into any conference and you'll see a sea of navy blazers, identical LinkedIn headlines, and presentations that could have been generated by the same template. Everyone's trying so hard to look professional that they've achieved something far worse. They've become invisible. Then, someone takes the stage and does something slightly different. Maybe they start with a question instead of an agenda. Perhaps they use hand-drawn sketches instead of PowerPoint slides. Or they might deliver their entire presentation in exactly 7 minutes because attention spans are shorter than goldfish memory, and goldfish remember things for 9 seconds. Suddenly, the room wakes up. Not because the content is revolutionary, but because the delivery is memorable. This is Edgecraft in action, the art of being just different enough to stick in people's minds without confusing them about what you actually do. Most people think standing out requires dramatic reinvention or gimmicky stunts, but the most effective differentiation is often subtle, a 10 to 20% twist that makes you unforgettable while keeping your core value crystal clear. The memory economics. In saturated markets, being 10% different can create 10 times the recall. Your brain is wired to notice and remember what breaks patterns. Psychologists call this the von Restorff effect, the tendency for distinctive items to be more memorable than common ones. When everyone in your field sounds the same, looks the same, and promises the same outcomes, even small differences become magnified in memory. This isn't just about being noticed, it's about being remembered when it matters. When someone needs the service you provide, they don't Google generic consultant. They think of the person who made an impression, the one who did something slightly different that stuck with them. Distinction also shrinks your marketing spend through word-of-mouth amplification. People don't refer good service providers, they refer interesting ones. When you give people something specific to talk about, they become your marketing department. You should talk to Sarah. She's the one who does strategy sessions as walking meetings, is infinitely more compelling than you should talk to Sarah, she's really good at strategy. Clear edges also repel wrong-fit clients early, saving you from projects that drain your energy and damage your reputation. When your approach is distinctive, people self-select based on whether your style matches their needs. This natural filtering creates better client relationships and higher satisfaction on both sides. The energy multiplier. A signature method doesn't just differentiate you, it energizes you. When you develop a distinctive approach that feels authentically yours, work becomes more engaging. You're not just executing someone else's playbook, you're expressing your unique perspective through your craft. Consistency simplifies countless micro-decisions that usually drain creative energy. When you have a signature format, you don't waste mental bandwidth deciding how to structure each project. The framework is set, you focus on the content and customization. Rituals create momentum and community in ways that surprise most practitioners. When you establish a regular practice, a weekly analysis, a monthly deep dive, a quarterly prediction, people start anticipating and participating. Your ritual becomes a gathering point that builds relationships and generates opportunities. The liver selection. Edgecraft starts with choosing one variable to push toward the edge while keeping everything else conventional. You might choose voice, adopting a tone that's more playful, blunt, poetic, or clinical than your competitors. Or you might choose format, delivering insights through teardowns, live builds, or micro-stories instead of traditional reports. The most powerful lever is often your promise, making a bold, specific commitment that only you can credibly deliver. Instead of "I'll help you improve your marketing," try "I'll identify 3 messaging changes that increase conversion rates by at least 15%, or you don't pay." The specificity and confidence signal expertise, while the guarantee reduces perceived risk. The key is the 10 to 20% rule. Push novelty just enough to be noticed without losing clarity. If people can't quickly understand what you do, you've pushed too far. If they forget you immediately after meeting you, you haven't pushed far enough. Pair your novelty with plain English benefits. Your edge should make your value more obvious, not more mysterious. I conduct strategy sessions as walking meetings because movement stimulates creative thinking and breaks down hierarchical barriers is Edgecraft. I do things differently is just vague posturing. The professional paradox. 3 myths keep people trapped in bland professionalism instead of memorable edgecraft. The first is that professional means neutral, but neutrality often signals uncertainty rather than competence. When you take a clear position or adopt a distinctive approach, you demonstrate confidence in your methods. Professional means reliable outcomes, not personality suppression. The second myth is that you should avoid polarization at all costs. But polarity creates valuable filtering. When your approach resonates strongly with some people and doesn't appeal to others, you've created clarity about who you serve best. Mild disagreement actually increases engagement because it forces people to form opinions about your ideas. The third myth is that branding is purely cosmetic, logos, colors, and fonts that make you look more polished. But real brand differentiation comes from behavior and promises kept. Your edge must tie directly to outcomes, not just aesthetics. Visuals matter, but delivery defines identity. The method development. Building your signature method starts with auditing your current assets to identify the weakest distinctive variable. Look at your bio, your proposals, your presentations, and your client interactions. Where do you sound most like everyone else? That's your opportunity zone. Draft 3 edge options and pick the boldest viable approach. Write a before and after positioning statement that shows the shift clearly. Before, I help companies improve their processes. After, I eliminate the 3 bottlenecks that kill productivity in growing teams. Name your method and outline 3 to 5 steps that deliver your promised outcome. Attach 1 metric that proves the method works. Publish a 1-page explainer that someone could understand in 60 seconds, along with a sample run that shows your method in action. Invite 5 prospects to experience your method firsthand. This serves multiple purposes. It tests whether your edge actually improves outcomes. It creates proof assets you can reference later, and it generates testimonials that mention your distinctive approach. The ritual design. Creating a recurring ritual amplifies your edge through repetition and community building. Choose something you can sustain weekly or monthly, a teardown of industry trends, a live problem-solving session, a first 10-minute audit of common challenges. Timebox your ritual and create a consistent artifact template. If you're doing weekly teardowns, maybe it's always a 5-minute video with 3 key insights. If you're running monthly problem-solving sessions, maybe it's always a 1-hour format with a specific structure and a summary document. Track ritual retention and referrals. How many people return for multiple sessions? How often do participants refer others? These metrics tell you whether your ritual is creating genuine value or just consuming your time. The naming strategy. Names are memory hooks that make your edge stickier. Use alliteration, rhythm, or unexpected combinations that roll off the tongue. Strategy sprints, revenue rescue, process autopsy. These phrases are easier to remember and repeat than generic descriptions. Title everything: your method, your ritual, your scoreboard, your signature questions. When concepts have names, they become more real and more referable. Keep names short enough to pass the 1-breath test. If you can't say it in a single breath, it's too long. Test your names in conversations before committing to them. Do people remember them? Do they use them when describing your work to others? Do they capture the essence of what makes your approach different? The proof protocol. Edgecraft without evidence is just performance art. Show before and after snapshots that demonstrate your edge's impact. Quantify the effect in 1 clear metric: time saved, revenue increased, errors reduced, satisfaction improved. Collect and publish 3 micro-case blurbs that reference your distinctive method. These don't need to be lengthy case studies, just brief stories that show your edge creating real value for real people. Using the revenue rescue method, we identified $50,000 in lost opportunities within the first week. Avoid hype and focus on proof. Let the results speak for your edge rather than making grand claims about how revolutionary your approach is. Understated confidence is more compelling than breathless promotion. The danger zones. 3 pitfalls can undermine your Edgecraft efforts. Confusing weirdness happens when your edge obscures rather than clarifies your value. Combat this by pairing every novel element with a blunt benefit claim. If people can't quickly understand why your difference matters, simplify your message. Gimmicks without outcomes create short-term attention but long-term credibility problems. Kill any edge that doesn't actually improve results for your clients. Your differentiation must be substantive, not just stylistic. Overpolarization can alienate potential clients unnecessarily. Keep your tone respectful and focus on use cases rather than attacking other approaches or identities. Your goal is to stand out, not to tear others down. The compound effect. When you nail your Edgecraft, the results compound quickly. Good outcomes include 1 visible edge change that you've successfully launched and a clear promise written in plain language on your website or marketing materials. Excellent outcomes mean your signature method is consistently used and referenced, and you've established a community ritual with at least 30% repeat participation. People start associating your name with your distinctive approach. The best outcome is when referrals explicitly mention your method and ritual, and your sales cycles shorten because people recognize your approach immediately. You become known not just for what you do, but for how you do it uniquely. But Edgecraft is just the beginning of true differentiation. Once you've learned to stand out in a crowded market, the next challenge is combining all your distinctive elements into something even more powerful. A position so specific and valuable that you become the obvious choice for a particular type of challenge. That's where the concept of personal monopoly transforms everything you thought you knew about competition. Chapter 7. Personal Monopoly. There's a consultant who gets paid 3 times the market rate to solve a problem that dozens of other consultants could technically handle. A designer who has a 6-month waiting list for projects that most designers complete in 2 weeks. A strategist who turns down more opportunities than most people ever receive. What do they have in common? They don't compete, they dominate. Not through superior talent or lucky breaks, but through something far more strategic. They've created personal monopolies in spaces so specific that competition becomes irrelevant. This isn't about being the best at everything. It's about being the only choice for something important. When you combine 2 or 3 moderately rare skills with a clear point of view and aim them at a specific problem, you create what economists call intersectional advantage, a position so unique that direct competition becomes nearly impossible. Most people think monopolies are about size and market power, but personal monopolies are about precision and positioning. They're built not through dominance, but through distinctiveness. The choice revolution. When you establish a personal monopoly, the fundamental dynamics of your career shift. You stop chasing opportunities and start attracting them. Instead of competing on price, you compete on fit. Instead of accepting whatever projects come your way, you choose the ones that energize you and decline the ones that don't. This isn't just about ego or lifestyle, it's about economics. When you're the obvious choice for a specific type of challenge, you can set the project tempo and scope. Clients adapt to your process instead of forcing you to adapt to theirs. Premium pricing becomes defensible because there's no direct substitute for what you offer. Clarity unlocks collaboration in ways that surprise most people. When partners know exactly when to call you, referrals become more targeted and valuable. Your audience self-selects based on whether their challenges match your expertise. Boundaries prevent scope creep because everyone understands what you do and don't handle. The alternative is exhausting. Constantly competing on generic capabilities, accepting whatever terms clients offer, and wondering why your expertise doesn't translate into premium opportunities. When you own a specific space, the market comes to you instead of forcing you to chase it. The formula architecture. A personal monopoly isn't a job title or a vague positioning statement. It's a precise formula that others can repeat when they describe what you do. I help specific who solve specific problem using distinctive method. The power lies in the intersection. Helping startups with strategy is broad and competitive. Helping enterprise companies with data analysis is broad and competitive. But helping venture-backed startups translate complex data into board-ready strategy presentations, that's a monopoly waiting to be claimed. Your monopoly sentence should be concrete enough that someone could repeat it accurately after hearing it once. Abstract language kills monopolies because it makes you forgettable and unreferable. I help companies optimize their processes could describe thousands of consultants. I eliminate the 3 bottlenecks that kill productivity in remote teams describes exactly one person. Publishing a manifesto anchors your point of view and gives people a way to understand your philosophy. This doesn't need to be a lengthy treatise, 500 words that explain your beliefs, your method, your promise, and your evidence. The goal is to stake out intellectual territory that becomes associated with your name. Building 3 proof projects around your formula creates the credibility foundation that transforms positioning from aspiration into reality. These projects should demonstrate your method in action and produce measurable outcomes that validate your approach. The narrowing paradox. The biggest fear people have about personal monopolies is that niches will limit their opportunities. This fear is backwards. Niches deepen leverage and accelerate compounding. When you're known for solving a specific problem exceptionally well, adjacent opportunities naturally emerge. Focus creates momentum that broadness dissipates. When you try to be everything to everyone, you become nothing to anyone. When you own a narrow space, you can expand from a position of strength rather than scrambling for any available opportunity. The key is sequence. Narrow to grow, then expand strategically. Tighten your who until it feels slightly scary. Pick problems that have both budgets and urgency attached. Add adjacencies only after you've established traction in your core space. Generalist perspective combined with niche execution creates the ideal positioning. You understand the broader context, but you deliver specific solutions. Breadth without a spike makes you a commodity. Depth without context makes you irrelevant. The combination makes you indispensable. The title trap. Many people confuse titles with monopolies, thinking that calling themselves Chief Innovation Officer or Digital Transformation Expert creates differentiation. But monopolies are created by results and reputation, not labels. Titles signal intent. Proof convinces buyers. The goal is to own a sentence, not a label. When people describe what you do, they should use your language, your framework, your method. She's the person who does the revenue rescue process is infinitely more valuable than she's a business consultant. This ownership happens through consistent delivery to a specific audience over time. Each successful project reinforces your positioning and creates social proof that attracts similar opportunities. Your reputation compounds because people know exactly what to expect when they work with you. The sentence workshop. Crafting your monopoly sentence requires iteration and testing. Write 5 variants and test them in real conversations. Pay attention to which versions generate follow-up questions and which ones create blank stares. Choose the variant with the most concrete nouns and verbs. Abstract language kills memorability. Add one measurable promise that differentiates your approach from generic alternatives. Instead of, I help companies improve their marketing, try, I identify 3 messaging changes that increase conversion rates by at least 15%. The specificity signals expertise, while the guarantee reduces perceived risk. Test your sentence with the stranger test. Could someone who's never met you repeat it accurately after hearing it once? If not, simplify until it passes this threshold. Complexity might impress colleagues, but clarity creates customers. The proof protocol. Your manifesto establishes your philosophy, but proof projects establish your credibility. Choose projects that showcase your method in action and produce before and after results that validate your approach. Document the process, measure the outcomes, and collect testimonials that reference your specific methodology. Ask for testimonials that tie directly to your monopoly sentence. Generic praise doesn't build monopolies. Specific recognition of your distinctive approach does. Working with Sarah transformed our team dynamics is nice. Sarah's conflict resolution method helped us reduce project delays by 40% is monopoly building. Design a simple offer that makes your monopoly tangible. One page that explains who you serve, what problem you solve, how you solve it, and what it costs. Include risk reversal through pilots or milestone-based payments. Add a clear call to action that makes it easy for qualified prospects to engage. The credibility borrowing. 2 strategies accelerate monopoly establishment. First, borrow credibility by citing industry metrics that your approach improves and referencing respected frameworks that you adapt. Use plain language to explain complex concepts. Jargon creates barriers, not authority. Show mini cases with numbers, not adjectives. Increased efficiency means nothing. Reduced processing time from 4 hours to 45 minutes means everything. Specific metrics make your claims credible and your results comparable. Second, make your approach repeatable through checklists, templates, and documented processes. Train collaborators on your method so they can extend your reach without diluting your quality. Publish frequently asked questions that preempt common objections and demonstrate your expertise. The expansion strategy. Personal monopolies aren't static positions, they're platforms for strategic growth. Once you've established dominance in your core space, adjacent opportunities become visible and accessible. The key is expanding from strength rather than desperation. Look for problems that your existing method could solve with minor modifications. If you've mastered revenue optimization for SaaS companies, perhaps subscription-based media companies face similar challenges. If you've perfected team communication protocols for remote startups, maybe distributed nonprofits need similar solutions. Resist the temptation to expand too quickly. Each new area requires proof projects and reputation building. Better to dominate one space completely than to be mediocre in multiple spaces. Your monopoly should feel unshakable before you start building the next one. The danger zones. 3 pitfalls can undermine your monopoly efforts. Being too broad makes you forgettable and unreferable. If your positioning could describe dozens of other people, narrow your who until it feels unmistakably specific. Better to own a small space than to rent a large one. Being too narrow can limit your market to unsustainable levels. If you can only find 5 potential clients for your service, add adjacent problems that your method can solve. The goal is specificity, not obscurity. Message market mismatch happens when your positioning doesn't resonate with your intended audience. Combat this by conducting 5 buyer interviews and rewriting your positioning using their exact language. Your monopoly sentence should sound like something your ideal client would say, not something you think sounds impressive. The compound effect. When you establish a true personal monopoly, the results are unmistakable. Good outcomes include a clear, testable positioning sentence and at least 1 proof project with a strong testimonial. Excellent outcomes mean 3 solid proof projects, a simple offer page, and warm leads who reference your specific sentence when they contact you. The best outcome is when 70% or more of your new opportunities come through reputation and referrals, and you can afford to be selective about which projects you accept. You might even develop a waiting list or intake windows because demand exceeds your capacity. But building a monopoly is only half the equation. The other half is proving that your positioning creates real value through rapid experimentation and feedback. That's where the discipline of systematic prototyping transforms theoretical positioning into practical results. And it's more systematic than most people realize. Chapter 8. Build prototypes. You've spent months crafting the perfect positioning statement. Your personal monopoly sentence is crisp, your edge is sharp, and your manifesto reads like poetry. You've identified your spikes, fitted your quirks, and reframed your shadows. On paper, everything looks brilliant. Then you sit down to actually build something, and the doubt creeps in. What if your positioning doesn't resonate? What if your edge is too weird? What if you've been living in a theoretical bubble while the real world operates by completely different rules? This is the moment where most people either freeze in analysis paralysis or make the opposite mistake, betting everything on one grand launch that will either validate their entire approach or destroy their confidence. Both paths lead to the same place: nowhere. There's a third option that successful people use but rarely talk about: systematic prototyping. It's the discipline of running small, fast experiments that turn your theoretical positioning into practical proof. Instead of risking everything on one big bet, you place many small bets that compound into clarity and confidence. The momentum machine. Shipped work beats imagined work every time. When you actually put something into the world, however imperfect, you generate data that no amount of planning can provide. You discover what resonates and what falls flat. You learn which parts of your positioning create excitement and which parts create confusion. Small wins build courage and clarity in ways that big plans never can. Each successful prototype proves that your weird can work, your fit can create value, and your monopoly can attract real demand. These micro-victories accumulate into the confidence needed to take bigger risks and make bolder moves. Feedback loops create course correction speed that prevents you from wandering down dead-end paths for months. When you ship weekly instead of quarterly, you can pivot quickly when something isn't working. You waste weeks instead of years on ideas that don't have legs. The alternative is the perfectionist's trap. Endless refinement of concepts that have never been tested with real users facing real problems. You can spend months polishing a positioning statement that sounds impressive in your head but creates blank stares in the market. The risk equation. Small bets cap your downside while maximizing your learning rate. Instead of risking your reputation on one major launch, you risk small amounts of time and energy on focused experiments. If a prototype fails, you've lost a week, not a year. Evidence attracts allies and clients in ways that promises never can. When you can show someone a concrete example of your approach working, even on a small scale, you don't need to convince them of your potential. They can see your capability in action. Failure becomes research instead of identity damage when you frame it correctly. Each unsuccessful prototype teaches you something valuable about your positioning, your market, or your execution. You're not failing at being a professional, you're succeeding at being a scientist. This reframing is psychologically crucial because it separates your self-worth from your experiment outcomes. You're not testing whether you're good enough. You're testing whether a specific approach creates specific value for specific people. The 30-day rhythm. The prototype cycle runs on a 30-day rhythm that balances speed with thoroughness. Week 1 focuses on planning and shipping your first tiny artifact. This might be a one-page explainer of your method, a short video demonstrating your approach, or a simple template that solves a common problem. Weeks 2 and 3 involve iteration and friction removal. You offer your prototype to 5 ideal users directly and gather their feedback. You refine based on what you learn and eliminate the obstacles that prevent people from engaging with your work. Week 4 culminates in a structured pilot with a real user who has a real problem and real stakes. This is where you measure whether your prototype actually creates the value you promised. You collect testimonials, document outcomes, and decide whether to kill, keep, or double down on this approach. The key is single metric focus. Define one success measure before you start. 5 meaningful replies, 2 qualified signups, 1 paying pilot, or whatever makes sense for your prototype. Avoid vanity metrics that make you feel good but don't indicate real demand. Pick action metrics that show people value what you're offering enough to invest time or money. Review weekly and adjust your hypothesis based on what you're learning. If people love your content but won't pay for your service, you might have a positioning problem. If they want to pay but can't understand your offering, you might have a clarity problem. The data tells you where to focus your improvements. The planning trap. 3 myths keep people stuck in preparation instead of execution. The first is believing you need a comprehensive plan before you can start. But big plans often hide procrastination behind the illusion of productivity. Direction beats detail in the early stages because reality will rewrite your plans anyway. The second myth is that one big launch will prove everything about your positioning and approach. But big launches create noisy datasets where it's hard to isolate what's working and what isn't. Multiple small tests give you cleaner data and faster learning cycles. Confidence builds from repeated signals, not single events. The third myth is that failure reflects your identity rather than your experiment design. This makes people afraid to test ideas that might not work, which paradoxically increases the likelihood of major failures later. When you treat failure as tuition, you pay small amounts frequently instead of catastrophic amounts occasionally. The betting strategy. Choosing your first prototype bet requires brutal simplicity. Pick the most straightforward expression of your method, the version that requires the least explanation and produces the clearest outcome. Define your audience, channel, and promise in one sentence that someone could repeat accurately. Set your single metric and minimum success threshold before you start. This prevents you from moving the goalposts when results don't match your hopes. If you said 5 meaningful replies would indicate success, then 4 replies means the prototype needs work, regardless of how encouraging those 4 replies were. Week 1 produces a 1-page artifact or teaser that demonstrates your approach. This doesn't need to be polished, it needs to be clear and actionable. The goal is to create something concrete that people can respond to. Week 2 involves direct outreach to 5 people who perfectly match your target audience. Don't post on social media and hope for the best. Send personal messages to specific individuals who have the exact problem you're trying to solve. Week 3 focuses on refinement and friction reduction. Based on the feedback from Week 2, eliminate one major obstacle that prevents people from engaging with your work. This might be simplifying your language, reducing the time commitment, or clarifying your value proposition. Week 4 delivers a structured pilot where someone with real stakes experiences your full method. This is where you measure actual outcomes and collect testimonials that reference your specific approach. The execution system. 2 systems will accelerate your prototyping success. First, create a visible scoreboard that tracks your shipping streak. Celebrate micro wins publicly to build momentum and accountability. Use deadlines with friendly pressure. Tell someone what you're shipping and when you're shipping it. Second, build friction-slaying infrastructure. Create templates for common communications, checklists for prototype setup, and canned messages for outreach. Block time on your calendar for prototype work and batch similar tasks to maintain focus. Enforce the half-scope rule. Whatever you think your prototype should include, cut it by 50%. Complexity kills prototypes because it makes them harder to build, harder to understand, and harder to iterate. Simple prototypes ship faster and generate clearer feedback. The learning loop. After each prototype cycle, log your results and tag your learnings by hypothesis. Did people understand your positioning? Did they see the value you promised? Did they take the action you wanted? Each data point updates your beliefs about what works and what doesn't. Decide whether to kill, keep, or double down on each prototype. Killing unsuccessful experiments quickly frees up energy for more promising approaches. Keeping moderately successful prototypes allows for incremental improvement. Doubling down on clear winners accelerates your momentum. Cue your next prototype immediately. Don't take breaks between cycles. Momentum compounds when you maintain consistent shipping rhythms. Each prototype builds on the learnings from the previous one, creating a compounding effect that accelerates your progress. The danger zones. 3 problems can derail your prototyping efforts. Crickets, complete lack of response, usually indicates a mismatch between your positioning and your audience's actual needs. Fix this by tightening your audience definition, sharpening your promise, and reaching out directly to 5 people who perfectly match your target profile. Scope creep happens when you keep adding features to your prototype instead of shipping what you have. Enforce the half-scope rule and freeze your feature list at the beginning of each week. You can always add complexity in the next cycle. Overwhelm occurs when you try to track too many metrics or run too many experiments simultaneously. Focus on 1 metric per prototype and 1 prototype per cycle. Automate administrative tasks and protect your time blocks from other commitments. The compound effect. When you master systematic prototyping, the results compound quickly. Good outcomes include 1 shipped prototype and 1 clear learning that improves your next experiment. You develop a refined promise that resonates with your target audience. Excellent outcomes mean 4 weekly ships and at least 1 paying pilot that validates your approach. You create a repeatable setup checklist that makes future prototyping faster and more systematic. The best outcome is a working flywheel where validated demand generates inbound leads who cite your prototype results when they contact you. Your prototyping becomes a marketing engine that attracts the right opportunities while filtering out the wrong ones. But prototyping is just the engine. You still need to know how to steer it. The final piece of the puzzle is learning to synthesize everything you've discovered into a sustainable system that keeps you sharp, responsive, and continuously evolving. That's where the real mastery begins. Go forth. You started this journey feeling scattered, average, replaceable. You were competing in games designed for generic players, wondering why success felt hollow even when you achieved it. You had edges, but kept them hidden. You had spikes, but averaged them out. You had quirks, but treated them as problems to fix. Now you have something different. A system for turning your weirdness into wealth, your differences into advantages, your supposed flaws into competitive moats. You've learned to see what others miss, build what others can't, and own what others won't. But knowledge without action is just expensive entertainment. The question isn't whether these principles work. You've seen the logic, understood the psychology, and mapped the process. The question is whether you'll use them to build something that matters. This final chapter isn't about learning more. It's about doing more. It's about taking everything you've discovered and turning it into a life that fits who you actually are instead of who you think you should be. The 7 Pillars Revisited. Let's consolidate what you've learned into 7 principles that will guide every major decision you make from now on. Weirdness is leverage. Your edges create memory, trust, and premium value in ways that generic competence never can. The traits that make you different are the traits that make you valuable. Stop hiding them. Start weaponizing them. Spikes beat averages. Concentrate your work where you're unmistakably strong instead of trying to be good at everything. Your valleys don't define your value. Your peaks do. Design your life around your spikes and manage your valleys with systems, partners, and guardrails. Fit creates value. Quirks without skills are just noise, but skills without quirks are just commodities. The magic happens when you translate your natural oddities into formal capabilities that solve real problems. Your weirdness becomes your delivery mechanism. Shadows can shine. The traits you've been criticized for often contain your most powerful advantages. Context turns flaws into features. Instead of fixing your shadows, learn to deploy them strategically in situations where they become strengths. Edges signal. Signature methods and rituals make you referable in ways that generic competence never can. When you dial your offering one notch odder without losing clarity, you become memorable, shareable, and ultimately irreplaceable. Monopoly's focus. Own a sentence, not a title. When you combine rare skills with clear positioning and aim them at specific problems, you create intersectional advantage that makes competition irrelevant. Let proof compound around your Monopoly sentence. Prototypes prove. Small bets produce data, speed, and confidence that big plans never can. Turn your theoretical positioning into practical proof through systematic experimentation. Ship weekly, learn constantly, iterate rapidly. The power transfer. These principles don't just change how you work, they change how you live. You gain agency over arena, choosing contexts that reward your natural wiring instead of forcing yourself into mismatched environments. You stop accepting whatever opportunities come your way and start attracting the ones that energize you. Reputation gravity kicks in when your signal becomes clear and consistent. Instead of chasing opportunities, you attract aligned allies who understand your value and want to amplify it. Your network becomes a force multiplier instead of a networking obligation. Courage economics transforms your relationship with risk. Each competent win buys future risk capacity. As your confidence grows through evidence, you can afford to take bigger bets and make bolder moves. Success compounds into the freedom to be even more authentically yourself. The relationship revolution. This work doesn't just improve your career, it transforms your relationships. Clarity reduces conflict because operating manuals and clear expectations prevent misunderstandings. When people know how you work best, they can adjust their approach accordingly. You start partnering by complement instead of convenience. Instead of working with whoever's available, you seek collaborators whose spikes fill your valleys and whose valleys align with your spikes. The result is teams that are stronger than the sum of their parts. Honest polarization becomes a feature, not a bug. The right people lean in when you express your authentic self, while the wrong people self-select out. This natural filtering creates better relationships with less effort because you're attracting people who appreciate your actual operating style. The new capabilities. You now possess 3 capabilities that most people never develop. First, you can craft a one-sentence position, an offer that creates confident introductions and faster yes or no outcomes. No more rambling explanations or confused networking conversations. You know exactly what you do and for whom. Second, you have a 30-day prototype plan that turns ideas into evidence. Instead of getting stuck in analysis paralysis or betting everything on one grand launch, you can systematically test your theories and build proof that compounds into opportunity. Third, you can attract premium opportunities that reference your edge and method. Instead of competing on price and availability, you compete on fit and distinctiveness. The market comes to you because you've made yourself the obvious choice for specific challenges. The compounding effect. The beautiful thing about this system is that it gets easier over time, not harder. Reputation compounds with each coherent signal you send. Every successful project reinforces your positioning and attracts similar opportunities. Each signal lowers your future marketing effort because your reputation does the selling. Process memory reduces cognitive load through templates and rituals. You stop reinventing your approach for every project and start refining a signature method that gets better with repetition. Decision-making becomes faster because you have clear criteria for what fits your positioning and what doesn't. Network effects amplify your reach as your community spreads your language and method. When people start using your frameworks and referencing your approaches, you've achieved something more valuable than fame. You've achieved influence. Your ideas take on a life of their own. The immediate action. Right now, while your motivation is high and the concepts are fresh, do 2 things. First, write your 3-word edge mantra and share it with one person today. Not tomorrow, not next week, today. This single action transforms abstract learning into concrete commitment. Second, define one prototype you'll ship this week. Choose the single metric that will indicate success. Schedule 2 blocks of time to work on it. Then ship something, however imperfect, by Friday. The goal isn't perfection, it's momentum. These 2 actions, sharing your edge and shipping a prototype, create the foundation for everything that follows. They turn intention into behavior and behavior into identity. The ultimate payoff. Here's what most people never realize about finding their purpose. It's not a destination you arrive at, it's a system you operate. Purpose isn't something you discover once and then coast on forever. It's something you build, test, refine, and rebuild as you grow and the world changes. The system you now possess is anti-fragile. It gets stronger under pressure because it's based on your authentic strengths rather than borrowed strategies. When the market shifts, you adapt by leaning deeper into your distinctiveness, not by abandoning it. When competition increases, you respond by sharpening your edge, not by blending in. You're no longer at the mercy of other people's definitions of success. You're not waiting for permission to be yourself or for someone else to recognize your value. You have a repeatable process for turning your weirdness into wealth, your differences into advantages, your authentic self into your competitive edge. The world doesn't need another generic professional. It needs the specific value that only you can provide. It needs your particular way of seeing problems, your distinctive approach to solving them, your unique combination of skills and perspectives. Your weird works, not despite your differences, but because of them. Not when you sand down your edges, but when you sharpen them. Not when you fit into existing categories, but when you create new ones. The future belongs to people who can't be replaced by algorithms, outsourced to cheaper alternatives, or replicated by competitors. It belongs to people who own their distinctiveness so completely that they become the obvious choice for the problems they're uniquely equipped to solve. You are that person. You always were. Now you have the system to prove it. Be brave, Be specific. Be seen. The world is waiting for what only you can build. Go forth and make your weird work.